The fluorescent lights at Desert Edge Gas and Mart buzzed like trapped insects against the vast darkness of the Arizona night. I'd grown used to that sound during my 3 months working the graveyard shift. The constant electrical hum that became the soundtrack to the emptiness. My name is Alex Reeves, 26, taking this job to pay off student loans while I applied for positions that actually used my psychology degree. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd soon be using every bit of that education to understand what was happening outside Pump Hash 7. It was just past midnight when the truck pulled in. A faded blue Ford with a dented rear quarter panel, and what looked like dried mud caked around the wheel wells. Nothing remarkable in a place where most vehicles carried the desert's dust. The driver cut the headlights but left the engine idling. A common enough practice when someone's just stopping for a quick coffee or bathroom break. But he didn't get out. I noticed after about 20 minutes, glancing up from my dog-eared paperback between customers. The silhouette behind the wheel remained perfectly still, facing forward, not slumped like someone napping, just waiting. I figured he'd come inside eventually. He didn't. An hour passed. The midnight rush, if you could call 3 truckers and a family with a crying baby a rush, had ended. Now it was just me, the humming lights, and the dark shape in the truck at Pump Hash 7. I tried to focus on restocking the coolers, but my eyes kept drifting to the security monitor. The grainy black and white feed showed the truck hadn't moved an inch. The driver remained a motionless silhouette behind the windshield, illuminated faintly by the overhead lights. Not on his phone, not eating, not sleeping, just sitting upright, facing the store, facing me. By 2 a.m., the unease had settled deep in my stomach. 2 hours. Who sits at a gas pump for 2 hours without getting gas? I considered calling my manager, Dale, but he'd made it clear that midnight calls better involve robbery or fire. I thought about calling the non-emergency police line, but what would I say? There's a guy sitting in his truck and it's creeping me out. I tried rationalization. Maybe his truck broke down and he was waiting for someone. Maybe he was gathering courage to rob the place, though sitting conspicuously for hours seemed like a terrible strategy. Maybe he was just lost in thought, dealing with some personal crisis. But each time I looked up, that dark shape hadn't moved, and each time the feeling grew stronger that he wasn't there by accident, that he was watching me specifically. At 2:30 a.m., an 18-wheeler pulled in. The driver, a regular named Mike, filled up and came inside for coffee and his usual microwave burrito. His presence was reassuring. Another human being in this bubble of fluorescent light surrounded by miles of darkness. Weird night? Mike asked, noticing my tension as I rang him up. That truck's been sitting at Pump 7 for hours, I said, keeping my voice low. Guy hasn't moved. Mike glanced out the window, frowning. Want me to check it out? I hesitated, embarrassed at my paranoia, but grateful for the offer. Would you mind? Mike nodded and walked out, his large frame momentarily blocking the view through the window. I watched on the monitor as he approached the truck, casual but purposeful. He leaned down slightly, peering through the driver's window. What happened next sent ice through my veins. The truck's door swung open so violently it nearly hit Mike. He stepped back quickly as the driver emerged, tall, lean, moving with an unnatural stiffness. Even in the grainy footage, I could see Mike's posture change, hands raised slightly in a universal no-trouble gesture. The two men spoke briefly, then Mike backed away, returning to the store with deliberate slowness. You know that guy? Mike asked when the door closed behind him, his voice unnaturally tight. I shook my head. Never seen him before. What did he say? Mike's weathered face looked troubled. Asked if I was friends with you. When I said no, just passing through, he got real quiet. Then he asked if you work here alone every night. Mike paused. I didn't answer that one. Bad vibe, kid. Real bad. My heart hammered against my ribs. Did he say what he wants? Said he's waiting for the right moment. Didn't elaborate. Mike glanced at his watch. Look, I gotta get back on the road, but I don't like leaving you here. Want me to call someone? I shook my head again, pride wrestling with fear. My shift ends at 4. Relief shows up then. I'll be fine. Mike looked unconvinced but nodded. Lock up after I leave. Don't go outside until your replacement gets here. After Mike left, I did exactly that, checking every lock twice. Through the window, I could see the driver had returned to his truck, but hadn't closed the door completely. He was still visible now, a gaunt face beneath a baseball cap, one hand resting on the steering wheel, the other out of sight below the dashboard. And he was looking directly at me. For the next hour, we remained in this strange standoff. Me inside, pretending to work while watching him on the monitor. Him outside, perfectly still except for his eyes, which followed my every movement. At 3:45 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from my relief. Janet. Car trouble. Going to be late. Janet. Car trouble. Maybe 5:30. Sorry. My stomach dropped. I was supposed to be out of here in 15 minutes. Now I was stuck for another hour and a half with whatever this was. At 4 a.m., the truck's engine, which had been idling all this time, suddenly cut off. The silence felt deafening. On the monitor, I watched the driver finally exit his vehicle completely. He stretched casual as could be, then opened his trunk and removed something long and metallic. A tire iron? A crowbar? A crowbar? He began walking slowly around his truck, testing each tire with a gentle kick, then circled back to pump #7. With deliberate movements, he removed the nozzle and began filling his tank. 3 hours sitting there, and only now he gets gas. I watched, transfixed, as he finished pumping, replaced the nozzle, and then, instead of returning to his truck, turned and walked directly toward the store entrance. My breath caught. I reached for my phone, finger hovering over the emergency call button. Through the glass door, I could see him clearly now. Mid-40s, deeply lined face, eyes that seemed too bright in their sunken sockets. He wore a faded green jacket over a flannel shirt, jeans stiff with dirt. The bell chimed as he entered, the sound impossibly loud in the silent store. Up close, he smelled of cigarettes and something metallic that might have been old blood. "Evening?" he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "Oh, morning? I guess it is now." I managed a tight nod, professional smile frozen on my face. "Can I help you?" "Just the gas," he said, placing a $50 bill on the counter. As I rang up the purchase, he added, "And maybe some information." My fingers paused on the register keys. Information? About Alexandra Reeves. My full name. The name I never use at work, where my tag simply reads Alex. The name that isn't on any documentation visible to customers. He must have seen the shock on my face, because his lips curved into something approximating a smile. "We have a mutual acquaintance. Professor Warren? From State? Professor Warren? My advisor in college 3 years ago." The connection made no sense. "How do you know Professor Warren?" I asked, voice steadier than I felt. "I don't," he replied simply. "But I read the dedication in his book, the one where he thanks his brilliant research assistant, Alexandra Reeves, for her groundbreaking work on trauma responses in isolated environments. My senior thesis. The project I'd spent a year on, interviewing victims of violent crimes that occurred in remote locations. The work that was supposed to launch my career, but instead became a footnote in someone else's publication. "What do you want?" I asked, abandoning any pretense of casual conversation. "To talk. About your research." He leaned forward slightly. "About how accurate your conclusions were." A chill ran through me as pieces clicked into place. The police had interviewed me last year about a man who attacked lone workers in isolated locations across 3 states. They'd found my thesis cited in materials at his home. They'd caught him, or so they'd said. "You're not him," I whispered. "They caught him. They caught someone," he corrected, that awful smile widening. "My brother, always the careless one. Left too much evidence, made too many mistakes." His eyes never left mine. "I'm much more careful." My hand slid beneath the counter, feeling for the panic button Dale had installed after the robbery last year. "I wouldn't," he said quietly. "By the time anyone responds, we'll be long gone, and I'd hate for things to get messy. His hand emerged from his pocket, revealing a hunting knife with a blade that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. You see, Alexandra, your research was fascinating. The psychological patterns you identified in predator-prey dynamics in isolated settings. Brilliant work. But there were inaccuracies. Things you got wrong about how we think, how we choose. His voice remained conversational, almost academic. I've been following your career since then, waiting for the right opportunity to discuss these points with you. In depth. My mind raced through options. The back exit was alarmed. My car was parked right outside. Janet wouldn't arrive for over an hour. No customers were likely at this hour. The register only has $200, I said. Trying a different approach, he laughed, a sound like dry leaves scraping concrete. I don't want money, Alexandra. I want you. Your mind. Your insights. We have so much to discuss. The knife twitched in his hand. Now you're going to come around that counter very slowly. We're going to walk out to my truck, and we're going to take a little drive, somewhere quiet where we can talk properly. His eyes gleamed. I've prepared quite thoroughly for our conversation. In that moment, something shifted inside me. 3 years of interviewing survivors, of studying their stories, their responses, their tactics. It all crystallized into clarity. I knew I couldn't show fear, couldn't be passive. Predators like him fed on terror and compliance. Before we go, I said, forcing calm into my voice, I need to use the bathroom. Confusion flickered across his face. Clearly not the response he expected. No tricks, he warned. No tricks, I agreed. Just human biology. Unless you want me getting sick in your truck. He considered this, then nodded toward the employee restroom behind the counter. Leave the door open. I moved slowly, deliberately, toward the small bathroom. As I passed the coffee station, I knocked over a pot of scalding coffee that had been brewing all night. It shattered against the floor, sending a wave of steaming liquid toward his legs. He jerked back instinctively, cursing as the hot coffee soaked his jeans. In that split second of distraction, I grabbed the fire extinguisher mounted on the wall and swung it with every ounce of strength I possessed. It connected with his head with a sickening thud. He staggered, knife clattering to the floor. I didn't wait to see if he'd stay down. I bolted for the door, keys already in hand. Outside, the desert air hit my lungs like ice water. I sprinted to my car, fumbling with the lock, throwing myself inside. As I jammed the key into the ignition, I saw him emerge from the store, blood streaming down the side of his face, eyes wild with rage. My car roared to life. I reversed violently, then slammed it into drive, tires squealing as I accelerated toward the highway. In my rearview mirror, I saw him stumbling toward his truck. I called 911 as I drove, words tumbling out between gasping breaths. The dispatcher assured me units were being dispatched, told me to keep driving, to head toward the nearest town 15 miles away. Headlights appeared in my mirror, his truck gaining on me. The speedometer crept past 80, past 90. My old Honda, protesting the abuse. Still, the truck grew larger in my mirror, its high beams blinding me. Just as he was about to ram my bumper, flashing lights appeared on the horizon ahead, a state trooper responding to the call. The truck's brakes squealed as it suddenly swerved, cutting across the desert scrub and disappearing down a dirt access road. Boy, the aftermath unfolded in a blur of police statements and crime scene investigations. They found disturbing items in the truck when they eventually located it abandoned 20 miles away. Duct tape, plastic sheeting, a camera, printouts of my research, and worse, photographs of me leaving work, shopping, at my apartment. He'd been watching for weeks. They never found him. The blood at the scene matched DNA from 3 unsolved murders across the Southwest. All isolated gas stations, all night shift workers, all people who, like me, had been watched, studied, and selected. I don't work nights anymore. I finished my doctorate, specializing in criminal psychology, turning my trauma into expertise. Sometimes I consult with the FBI on cases with similar patterns. They still haven't caught him. And sometimes when I'm driving alone at night, I see headlights lingering too long behind me. I remember those hours at Desert Edge Gas and Mart. I remember the man who waited outside Pump Hash 7, studying me, preparing for me, selecting me. I remember how thin the barrier is between safety and danger. How easily someone can watch from the darkness, learning your patterns, biding their time. How patient a predator can be when they've chosen their prey. Locker 14 was never supposed to be opened again. The key in my hand felt like a cold, dead secret. That's the thought that slammed into me, right? Not at first. At first, it was just another Tuesday night, or rather, early Wednesday morning, at the last stop, Gas and Go. My name is Alex. I was 22, working the graveyard shift to pay for community college. The last stop wasn't exactly a bustling hub of activity after midnight. Mostly it was me, the humming coolers, the flickering fluorescent lights, and the occasional long-haul trucker looking for questionable coffee and a cleanish restroom. It was a lonely job, boring mostly, but it paid the bills. The station itself was old, a bit run down, smelling faintly of stale cigarettes and gasoline. I was doing my usual closing routine, mopping the grimy floor, wiping down the counter, trying to make the place look marginally less depressing for the morning guy. That's when I saw it, tucked away under the lip of the counter, almost invisible unless you were practically on your hands and knees, was a small, old-fashioned metal key. It had a tarnished brass tag attached, stamped with a single, stark number. 14. I frowned. Lockers? Lockers? We didn't have any lockers. Not for staff. Not for customers. The only locked things were the cash register, the cigarette display, and the door to the back storeroom, which Mr. Henderson, the station manager, kept the only key for, or so I thought. This key felt different, old, unused. A little thrill, the kind you get when you find something you're not supposed to, went through me. The next afternoon, when I came in to pick up my paycheck, I showed it to Henderson. He was a man in his late 50s, paunchy, with a permanent 5 o'clock shadow in eyes that always seemed tired and a little shifty. When he saw the key, the color drained from his face. I mean, literally. 1 second he was his usual grumpy self. The next he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Where did you find that? He stammered, his hand reaching out and snatching back as if the key might burn him. Under the counter by the register, I said, my curiosity now fully piqued. What's it for? We don't have lockers, do we? Henderson swallowed hard. He licked his lips. No, nothing. It's an old key from before. Different business owned the place then. He snatched the key from my hand. Just trash. I'll get rid of it. His sudden intense nervousness was a blaring red flag. He practically shoved my paycheck at me and bustled into the back room, muttering something about inventory. But later that week, during another soul-crushingly slow night shift, I found the key again, not under the counter. This time, it was deliberately placed on the small shelf where we kept the lost and found items, almost as if it was meant for me to find again. Or maybe Henderson was just getting sloppy in his old age. The unease returned. Stronger this time. He was lying, and he was scared. I started paying more attention to the back storeroom. It was a cluttered, windowless space, filled with dusty boxes of motor oil, expired candy, and forgotten promotional displays. But in the far back corner, mostly hidden behind a leaning tower of empty antifreeze jugs, was a bank of old, rusted metal lockers. The kind you see in old high schools. Most were dented, their doors hanging open, except for one, number 14. It was closed, tight, and it looked different. Newer paint around the edges, as if it had been forced shut and then sealed, or maybe just hadn't been opened in a very, very long time. A faint, almost imperceptible smell emanated from that corner. Musty, metallic, and something else. Something vaguely sweet and rotten. Was I overreacting? I kept asking myself. It was just an old locker. But Henderson's reaction, the reappearing key, it gnawed at me. I did a quick search on my phone during a lull. Last stop gas and go Oak Haven missing employee. Nothing specific. Then I broadened it. Oak Haven missing persons cold cases. A few articles popped up. One, from about 10 years ago, mentioned a young woman named Sarah Rinaldi, a college student who'd worked part-time at a local convenience store and had vanished without a trace. Her car was found abandoned a few towns over. No suspects, no leads. The case had gone cold. The photo accompanying the article was grainy, but her smile was bright. She looked about my age. The key felt heavy in my pocket. Locker 14. Sarah Rinaldi. Was there a connection? Or was I just a bored night shift worker with an overactive imagination, fueled by too much true crime? The following Saturday night, the station was dead. A thick fog had rolled in, muffling sounds, making the world outside the brightly lit island of the gas station feel distant and unreal. Henderson had left early, looking even more haggard than usual. I was alone. The key was in my hand. The key was in my hand. The smell from the back room seemed stronger tonight, and I could have sworn I heard a faint sound from back there, a soft, rhythmic scratching, like a trapped animal, or fingernails on metal. My heart was pounding. This was stupid. This was crazy, but I had to know. I unlocked the storeroom door, the old lock grating loudly in the silence. The scratching sound stopped. The air in the storeroom was cold, heavy. I navigated through the clutter, my phone's flashlight beam dancing nervously, until I reached the bank of lockers. Number 14. It looked even more ominous in the dim light. There was no visible keyhole, just the number painted on the rusted metal. But as I ran my fingers along its edge, I found it. A tiny, almost invisible slit, right next to the own. The key slid in with a faint click. It turned. The door creaked open with a groan of tortured metal. The smell that hit me was overpowering, sweet, rotten, metallic. My stomach heaved. Inside, it wasn't empty. There was a small, worn, leather-bound diary. A few faded photographs of Sarah Rinaldi, laughing with friends, posing by a lake, a cheap silver locket, a single, mud-caked hiking boot, and at the bottom, a small, clear plastic bag, the kind police use for evidence. It had been torn open. Inside, nestled on a piece of cotton, was a clump of dark hair, tied with a faded blue ribbon. My blood ran cold. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a forgotten locker. This was a tomb, a shrine. But the most chilling thing, the thing that made the hair on my arms stand up, was a small, neatly folded piece of notebook, paper tucked into the diary. It wasn't old. The ink was fresh. It read, "Still miss US. See you soon." And beside it, a single freshly picked daisy. Someone else knew about this locker. Someone had been here. Recently, suddenly, the lights in the storeroom flickered, then died, plunging me into absolute blackness. The main storeroom door slammed shut with a deafening bang, followed by the distinct, horrifying sound of a key turning in the lock from the outside. I was trapped. "Looking for something, Alex." Henderson's voice, no longer tired and grumpy, but cold, flat, and utterly devoid of emotion, came from the other side of the door. Sarah was curious, too. It didn't end well for her. Footsteps approached, heavy and deliberate. Some things are best left locked away. For everyone's sake. Panic, pure and undiluted, clawed at my throat. He knew. He'd been watching me. The key. The locker. Sarah. Henderson was at the center of it all. The scratching sounds. Had it been him, in here, tending to his gruesome secret? I didn't scream. There was no point. I fumbled in the dark, my hands searching for anything, any way out. My fingers brushed against a loose ventilation grate high on the back wall of the storeroom, something I'd never noticed before. It was small, probably led to the outside. Hope? A desperate, fragile thing flickered. Henderson was rattling the doorknob now, testing it. I don't know how I managed it. Adrenaline, terror. I scrambled onto a stack of boxes, pried at the grate. It came loose with a screech of rusted metal. I squeezed through the narrow opening, scraping my skin, dropping into the cold, foggy night air behind the station, just as I heard Henderson finally force the storeroom door open. I ran. I didn't stop running until I reached the police station downtown, gasping out my story, the key to locker 14 still clutched in my hand like a talisman against the evil I'd just escaped. The investigation was complicated. Henderson, when they finally picked him up, was calm, denying everything. The locker, just some old things of Sarah's he'd kept, meaning to give them to her family. But they'd moved away. The note, the flower, he'd put them there himself, a sentimental gesture. He'd locked me in the storeroom by accident, thought I'd already left for the night. There was no hard evidence to directly tie him to Sarah Rinaldi's disappearance 10 years ago. Not in a way that would stick. The hair in the bag was too degraded for definitive DNA. The diary hinted at a troubled relationship with an older, controlling man, but named no names. They never found out what really happened to Sarah. Henderson eventually lost his job. The last stop gas and go was sold, then torn down. But sometimes, when I'm driving late at night, and I pass by a lonely, flickering gas station sign, I feel that old, cold dread. I think of that key, of that metallic, rotten smell, of the fresh daisy in that dark, forgotten locker. And I know that some secrets don't stay buried, no matter how well they're locked away. They just wait, patiently, for the next curious hand to turn the key. The little bell above the door of the Wandering Quill usually made a cheerful, welcoming sound. Tonight, it just sounded like a death knell. That's a bit dramatic, I know. But looking back, that's the thought that sticks. My name is Lena. For the past 5 years, I've owned and operated the Wandering Quill, a small independent bookstore in the quieter, older part of Oakhaven. It's my sanctuary, my life's work. Most nights, I close up around 9 p.m. A comfortable, familiar routine. I live a few blocks away, a cozy little bungalow, just me and my scruffy terrier, Buster. It's a good life, or it was. The first off note was a sound, so faint I almost missed it. I was in the back office, cashing out the register, the shop dimly lit by a single desk lamp. A soft, persistent tapping seemed to come from the alley door, the one I always bolted from the inside an hour before closing. I froze, listening. Probably just the wind rattling the old fire escape, I told myself. Or a stray cat. It stopped as soon. I focused on it. I remember shaking my head, a little annoyed at my own jumpiness. Still, the hairs on the back of my neck prickled. It was probably nothing, right? Just the old building settling. But why did a sudden chill crawl down my spine? The next morning when I came in to open the alley door, the one I knew I'd bolted, was unlatched, open just a crack, a sliver of gray morning light slicing into the dusty storeroom. My heart hammered. I checked everything. Nothing seemed to be missing, nothing obviously disturbed. I told myself I must have been tired, careless. But the doubt, a cold little seed, had been planted. Over the next week, the unsettling little things started to accumulate. A book on local folklore, one I kept on a high shelf, would be found on the floor in the morning as if someone had tried to reach it and failed. The new releases display, which I arranged meticulously every Monday, would have 1 or 2 books, subtly out of order. Buster, on our late night walks home, started growling at shadows in the alley that ran behind my house. His hackles raised, something he never did. I was jumpy, irritable, sleeping poorly. You were just stressed, Lena. I kept telling myself, too much caffeine, not enough sleep. Then, I started seeing him. A man. Nondescript. Maybe late 40s. Always wearing a plain baseball cap, pulled low, and a faded denim jacket. Regardless of the weather, he'd linger across the street, sometimes for an hour or more, just looking at my shop. If I glanced his way, he'd quickly turn his head, or pretend to be engrossed in his phone. He never came in, at first. The dread was a slow burn, a tightening in my chest that never quite went away. I started varying my closing routine, double and triple checking the locks. I'd peer out the front window before stepping out into the night, scanning the empty street. The feeling of being watched was a constant companion, an invisible weight. Was I overreacting? He hadn't done anything, just looked. People look at shop windows all the time, right? Then, one rainy Tuesday evening, about 10 minutes before closing, the bell above the door chimed. It was him, the man from across the street. He dripped rainwater onto my worn wooden floors, his baseball cap still pulled low, obscuring his eyes. The shop was empty, except for me, just browsing. He mumbled, his voice surprisingly soft, almost gentle. He didn't browse. He walked slowly through the aisles, his hands in his pockets, his gaze sweeping over everything. But mostly, it felt like over me. The air grew thick, heavy. He picked up a cheap mass-market paperback, a thriller I wouldn't have pegged him for. He brought it to the counter. As I rang it up, he finally looked at me, a fleeting glance from under the brim of his cap. His eyes were pale, colorless, and held a strange, unnerving stillness. "Buster must enjoy his walks down by Miller Park," he said, his voice still soft. "Especially near that big old oak tree by the creek." My blood ran cold. Buster, my dog, Miller Park, our usual evening route. How could he possibly know that? I hadn't mentioned my dog, hadn't mentioned where I walked him. "He's a good dog," the man continued, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "You always lock your back door at 9-7 p.m., right after you turn off the main lights and set the little night light in the window." Very precise. My breath caught in my throat. My routine. My specific, unvarying routine. He knew. I don't know what you mean," I stammered, my hands shaking as I gave him his change. His smile widened, just a fraction, but it was utterly devoid of warmth. "Oh, I think you do, Lena." He took his book, his fingers brushing mine. His skin was cold, clammy. "Have a good night." He turned and walked out, the bell above the door sounding like a mocking laugh. I looked up, my body trembling, my mind reeling. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't casual observation. He'd been watching me. For how long? How closely? The sanctity of my shop, my home, my life, felt violated, stripped bare. The next few days were a living nightmare. I reported it to the police. They took a statement, promised to patrol the area, but without a direct threat, without a clear crime. Their hands were tied. "He didn't actually do anything, Miss Hayes," Officer Miller said, not unkindly. "Just made some unsettling comments." Unsettling? Right. I installed new locks, a security camera in the shop. I carried pepper spray. I barely slept. Every shadow held his shape. Every quiet footstep sounded like his. Then, a week later, he came back. Same time. Just before closing. The shop was empty. My heart leaped into my throat. He walked straight to the counter. No pretense of browsing this time. His baseball cap was still pulled low, but I could see the glint of his pale eyes. "Sarah," he said, my name a soft caress that made my skin crawl. "My name is Lena, not Sarah." Was he confused, or was this another layer of his sick game trying to unnerve me further? "It's Lena," I corrected, my voice surprisingly firm. He chuckled, a dry rasping sound. "Of course, Lena. I know you live on Elm Street, number 214. Cute little blue house. Buster is a good boy, isn't he?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I've been watching you for weeks, Lena, getting to know you, all your little habits." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small, placing it on the counter between us. A crudely carved wooden figure of a dog, a scruffy terrier. It looked horrifyingly like Buster. "A little gift," he said, his smile finally reaching its full, terrifying bloom. "So you don't forget me." He paused, his eyes boring into mine, cold and possessive. "I'm not here to hurt you, Lena." Another beat of silence, stretching into an eternity. Yet, he turned then, and walked out of my shop, whistling a tuneless, jaunty little air, leaving me frozen, staring at that grotesque wooden dog, the echo of his final word hanging in the air like a death sentence. The police found him a few days later, thanks to the security footage from my shop and a partial license plate. A neighbor had noticed. His name was Arthur Jennings. He had a record: stalking, harassment, a series of restraining orders from women in other towns. Women who had also owned small businesses. Women who had also lived alone. He was a predator, a collector of routines, of fears. He never hurt them physically, not in a way the law could easily prosecute. He just dismantled their lives, their sense of safety, with his quiet, persistent, terrifying attention. They couldn't hold him for long. Not enough evidence for a serious charge, they said. He disappeared after being released. I sold the Wandering Quill. I sold my little blue house on Elm Street. I moved to a different city, a bigger, more anonymous place. I have a new dog now, also a terrier. But I don't walk him in the same places twice. I don't have a routine. They say Jennings was never seen in Oak Haven again. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind rustles the curtains in my new, heavily secured apartment, I'll catch a faint, almost imaginary whiff of stale denim and something else, something cold and watchful. I still have that little wooden dog, tucked away in a box. A grim reminder. And I wonder, not if he's still out there watching someone else, learning their habits, but when his yet will finally arrive for one of them, or for me. The drip of a mop bucket still echoes in my head. That sour tang of bleach and blood. I'm 20 now, slinging coffee in a new town in Georgia. My sketchbook full of nothing but straight lines, no curves, no faces. Last year I was just Casey, a night shift janitor at Petrostop Hash 41 off I-95 near Charleston, thinking I could outrun my dropout life. But that Thursday night, the bathroom door stuck, and what I found behind it, those notes, those photos, still claws at me. The cops got Rick, but the seventh girl's out there, and sometimes I hear her whisper. It's 2:17 a.m., and the women's restroom door at Petrostop Hash 41 won't budge. I'm Casey, 19, in yellow rubber gloves. The squeak of my mop bucket wheels loud over cracked tiles. The trash station's a dive. Flickering Snickers sign. Truckers grabbing dip and energy drinks. The hum of fluorescence my only company. I shoulder the door, the scrape jarring, and it gives a wet squelch underfoot. The smell hits like a fist. Pennies left in the sun. Sharp, wrong. My reflection twists in the security camera above. Pale, warped. The drip of a faucet too slow. Water pools around the sinks pinkish. Oily streaks swirling. Not from a leak. Drag marks cut through. Wide, like someone in soaked denim was pulled. The stall's worse. The toilet seat's cracked. Hinges ripped from the wall. Bolts bent. Behind it, wedged in the tile, a scrap of motel stationery from the Notel Inn 2 exits down, scrawled with "Help" in shaky block letters. My pulse spikes, the buzz of a fly circling too close. I call Rick, my manager, voice trembling. Clean it up, he snaps, hanging up before I mention the boot print on the ceiling, too high, too deliberate. I scrub the slosh of bleach drowning my thoughts, telling myself it's a prank, a drunk's mess, but my gut screams louder. The next night, a semi-idles at pump 3 for hours. Exhaust curling. No driver in sight. I haul trash. The clang of the dumpster lid sharp. And the cab door swings open. Empty. On the passenger seat, another note. Help me. Same handwriting. Same motel logo. My hands shake. The rumble of the truck's engine like a growl. I text Rick, but he radios back. Voice too chipper. Stay thorough, Casey. The crackle of static feels like a warning. Rick starts checking in every half hour, his squeak of a chair loud over the radio. I catch him at the monitors, rewinding footage of me mopping, his eyes fixed, breath heavy with bourbon and mint. His eyes fixed, breath heavy with bourbon and mint. Accident reports, he mutters, but his hands twitch, like he's hiding something. My stomach churns. The flicker of the Snickers sign outside too much like eyes. I wait for his 3 a.m. Smoke break, heart pounding, and snag the storage closet key from under his desk. The creak of the door is deafening, revealing a black duffel. Zip tight, heavy. I tear the zipper, The rip echoing, and gag. Driver's licenses. 7. All women. Brunettes. My age. My build. Below. Polaroids of the restroom stall. Different dates. Different girls. One alive. Clutching that motel notepad. Eyes wide. Another lifeless. Her face gray. My breath catches. The jingle of keys. Outside, snapping me back. The back door slams, Rick's silhouette filling the frame. A tire iron in his hand, glinting. Good at cleaning messes, he says, voice low. Be a shame if you were one. His motive's clear. Predator, using the tour station as his hunting ground. Picking off stragglers, his accidents, a twisted thrill. I grab the fire extinguisher, the thunk of metal on bone loud as Rick's nose caves. Blood spray. He drops, groaning. And I run, dialing 911. My voice a mess. Cops swarm, finding the duffel, the photos, and 2 coolers in Rick's freezer. Leftovers? They whispered. Faces pale. Petrol stop wasn't his first stop. He'd worked truck routes for years, leaving bodies behind. They hauled him away, his laugh sharp, unhinged as sirens wailed. The news called it a serial case. 7 missing, 6 found. But the 7th girl, her license showed a smile like mine, vanished. I quit, moved, started over, sketching only lines, no people. Petro stop #41 is gone, shuttered in 24. But I hear that bathroom door creak in my dreams. The drip of pink water endless. Last week, a note slid under my door, motel stationery, no words, just help in that shaky scrawl. My new apartment string gurgled last night, wet wrong. And I swear I heard her whisper, faint, desperate. I check my locks, keep a bat close. But every splash of water, every crackle of static, feels like Rick. Or her. Still out there. Still waiting. The coffee shop's hum can't drown the drip, that whisper. I'm safe, they say. But the 7th girl's out there. Her note in my hand. Petra stop stole, still open for one more. The bell above the gas station door jangled, sharp and wrong in the dead of night. A sleek black car, too clean for these dusty Louisiana roads, rolled up, and the driver, a guy in a crisp suit, asked for directions to the Henderson place. His eyes didn't blink, just bored into me. Old man Thibodeau, nursing his coffee by the counter, froze, his mug halfway to his lips. Zone, folks who go looking for the Henderson place after dark, they ain't always the ones who come back. Lock up tight tonight. A faint thump echoed from the storage room, like something heavy settling. My skin prickled. What kind of place draws a man like that at 2 a.m.? I'm 23, working nights at a crumbling gas station in rural Louisiana, where the air smells like swamp mud and gasoline. It's May 2025, and I'm stuck here to pay off student loans, ringing up truckers and locals, like old man Thibodeau. We tell stories about gators and moonshine. The station's a dye flickering lights, sticky floors, and a radio that hums static. That night, after the suit left, the place felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums. I locked the door, my hands sweaty, but the thump from the storage room came again, heavier, like a boot on wood. I grabbed a flashlight, telling myself it was just rats. The beam shook across the cluttered shelves, cans of oil, a mop, a stack of old tires. A box had fallen, spilling receipts, but something glinted inside. A key, rusted, with a tag reading Henderson. My stomach twisted. I'd never heard of the place, but Thibodeau's fear stuck with me, his eyes wide like he'd seen something he couldn't unsee. I pocketed the key, my pulse ticking up, and checked the security feed. The lot was empty, but a shadow flickered at the edge, too tall to be a stray dog. The next night, a regular Miss Clara, a diner waitress, saw me gripping the key and went pale. That's from the Henderson place, she whispered, her hands twisting her apron. Burned down years ago. Bad folks lived there. Bad things happened. Her voice dropped, like she was scared to say more. I laughed it off, but my chest tightened. That night, the radio crackled, spitting a voice. Loud, garbled, saying my name. I yanked the plug, my heart hammering, but the static lingered in my ears. I started noticing things. The station's back door, always locked, was ajar, muddy footprints smearing the floor. A cigarette butt, still warm, lay outside, though no one had been there. My hands shook as I mopped it up, the bleach smell choking me. I told myself it was kids, but my gut screamed otherwise. Around 3 a.m., headlights swept the lot. A black car, same as before, idling just beyond the light. The driver didn't move, just sat there, a cigarette glowing red in the dark. My breath caught. I locked the door, my fingers fumbling, and crouched behind the counter. The next day, I asked Thibodeau about the Henderson place. His hands trembled, coffee spilling. People disappeared there, he muttered. Cops never found him. Stay away, boy. His eyes darted to the window, like he expected someone to be listening. That night, a note was taped to the register. Leave the key, scrawled in black ink, the letters jagged. My knees buckled. I checked the cameras. The feed cut out for 10 minutes, right when the note appeared. I couldn't stop. I googled the Henderson place. Old articles about missing hikers, a fire in '98, rumors of a trafficking ring. My throat tightened. At midnight, the power flickered, plunging the station into darkness. A low scrape came from the storage room, like metal on concrete. I grabbed the tire iron from under the counter, my palms slick, and crept toward the sound. The door was open, the key gone from my pocket. My flashlight caught a figure, tall in a suit, his face shadowed, holding a knife. My heart stopped. He lunged, the blade glinting, and I swung the tire iron, connecting with his arm. He grunted, stumbling, and I ran, the bell jangling as I burst outside. I sprinted to my car, tires screeching as I floored it. The black car followed, its headlights blinding in my rear view. I called 911, my voice cracking, weaving through back roads until I lost him in the swamp's maze. The cops searched the station, found the key in a pool of blood. No body. They dug into the Henderson place, found shallow graves, eyes, bones. The man was part of a ring, luring drifters to the ruins, killing for profit or pleasure. They never caught him, but the station's cameras caught his face once. Cold eyes, a scar across his cheek. I quit, moved to Omaha, got a desk job. But I don't sleep. Every car engine, every shadow, feels like him. Last week, a key arrived in my mailbox, rusted, with a tag. Henderson. No note, just the faint smell of smoke. I burned it, but I still hear that scrape in my dreams. He's out there, and he knows where I am. The first thing I noticed about Dean wasn't his silence. Plenty of people are quiet. It was his eyes. The way they'd lock onto certain vehicles pulling into our station, tracking them with an unnerving focus while his body remained perfectly still. His lips would curl into a slight smile that never reached those eyes. I first caught it happening during our second shift together. A beat-up Chevy sedan pulled up to Pump 7, and Dean froze mid-sentence, his attention completely consumed by the vehicle. Something about that smile made my skin crawl, like he recognized an old friend, or a perfect target. I'd been working the graveyard shift at Sanderson service station for almost 2 years. The place was a relic, sitting on what used to be the bustling Route 66 before the interstate diverted most traffic. Now he mostly served long-haul truckers, insomniacs, and the occasional tourist trying to recapture some nostalgic Americana. The pay was decent, the work easy enough, and the solitude suited me. At least until management hired Dean and told me to show him the ropes. From day one, something felt off. Dean was in his late 20s, thin but wiry, with close-cropped hair and posture too rigid for someone working a minimum-wage gas station job. He absorbed information quickly, barely needed instructions repeated, and moved with deliberate efficiency. Not the usual stoner or college dropout we typically got applying for the graveyard shift. You work nights before? I asked during his first training shift, trying to make conversation in the tomb-like quiet of the empty station. Here and there, he replied, eyes scanning the store methodically. I prefer when most people are asleep. The fluorescent lights hummed above us, casting harsh shadows across his angular face. Outside, the neon open sign flickered, painting the empty forecourt in pulses of red. Dean's attention kept drifting to the windows, to the pumps, to the road beyond. By his third night, I noticed the pattern. Dean showed no interest in the regulars, the truckers who came in like clockwork for coffee, the night shift workers from the warehouse down the road, the occasional cop doing rounds. But when certain vehicles pulled in, older sedans, nondescript SUVs with out-of-state plates, pickup trucks with single male drivers, his entire demeanor would change. He'd go still, watchful, that unsettling half-smile appearing. Sometimes he'd position himself near the window, angling his body so the driver could see him, but I couldn't easily observe their interaction. The first time I caught him signaling to someone, it was subtle. A single nod to a man in a dark Impala who never came inside, just pumped gas and drove away. I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching Dean so closely by then. Know that guy? I asked casually. Dean's face remained neutral. No. Why? Thought I saw you nod to him. Just being polite, he said, turning away to straighten items that were already perfectly aligned on the shelf. I started keeping track after that. A gray Toyota at 2:17 a.m. A blue pickup at 3:42 a.m. A black SUV with Arizona plates just before dawn. None were regular customers. None ever came inside, and Dean acknowledged each one with increasingly obvious signals. A nod, a subtle wave, once even a flash of what looked like a hand signal. The unease grew inside me like a living thing. I started checking the security cameras more frequently, volunteering to do inventory in the back office where I could review footage without Dean noticing. Most of it showed nothing unusual, just Dean doing his job, staring out at the pumps. But occasionally when he thought I wasn't around, he'd step outside briefly to speak with certain drivers. The cameras had no audio, so I could only see the exchanges, quick, furtive conversations, sometimes passing small objects between them. "Everything okay with the inventory?" Dean asked one night, appearing silently in the office doorway as I quickly switched screens. His eyes flicked to the security monitor, then back to me. "Fine," I said, heart hammering in my chest, just double-checking the cigarette count. He lingered in the doorway longer than necessary, studying me with those cold eyes. "You've been in here a lot lately." "Manager's been on my case about shrinkage," I lied. Dean nodded slowly, not believing me for a second. "Let me know if you need help. I'm good with spotting things that don't belong." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. That night, I called my manager from my car. "The new guy seems off," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "What's his background?" Dean came with good references. "Why? He causing problems?" I hesitated, suddenly aware of how paranoid I'd sound. "Just curious. He doesn't talk much about himself." "Not everyone's a chatterbox, Alex," my manager chuckled. "Give him time." But time was making things worse, not better. Dean began watching me as much as the pumps, tracking my movements, appearing silently in rooms I'd just entered. I started taking photos of the security footage with my phone, documenting the strange meetings, the signals, just in case. Just in case. One night, around 3 a.m., a dark van pulled in. Older model, windows tinted, no front license plate. Dean straightened immediately, that familiar focus taking hold. But this time, instead of the usual subtle acknowledgement, he picked up the store phone and dialed a number. "It's here," he said quietly, his back to me. "Yes, just one. I'll handle it." The hairs on my neck stood on end. Whatever had been building these past weeks was coming to a head. I pretended to restock the coffee station, keeping one eye on Dean as he hung up and moved toward the door. "I need to check something outside," he said. "Watch the register." "Sure thing," I replied, my mouth dry. The moment he stepped outside, I slipped into the back office and pulled up the exterior cameras. Dean approached the van, speaking to the driver through the window. After a brief conversation, he glanced back at the store, checking if I was watching, then walked around to the rear of the van. The driver got out, opened the back doors. The camera angle couldn't show what was inside, but I saw Dean nod approvingly. Then he pointed toward the store. Toward me. Cold fear washed over me as the driver looked in my direction, nodding. They were talking about me. I wasn't just paranoid. Something was very wrong. Something was very wrong. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911 when the back door opened. "What are you doing?" Dean asked, his voice unnervingly calm. I fumbled with my phone, trying to look casual. "Just checking messages. My mom's been sick." Dean stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. The small space suddenly felt airless, claustrophobic. "You've been watching me," he said. "Not a question? A statement of fact? I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do." He moved closer, backing me against the desk. "I've seen you reviewing footage, taking pictures. You're curious about my friends. They're not just customers, are they?" I managed to ask, my voice steadier than I felt. Dean's face changed then. The mask of indifference slipping to reveal something colder, more calculating. "No," he admitted. "They're not. They're not. I'd have to address this situation. But tonight's special. Tonight, you might actually be useful." "Useful for what?" "We move things through here," he said, as if explaining something simple. "Products that need to travel quietly. This station is perfect. Remote, minimal security, easy access to both the old highway and the interstate. Drugs, I guessed." Dean smiled, almost amused. "Sometimes. Other things too. Things that are harder to move. Things that need special handling." He glanced at his watch. "And right now, we have a delivery that needs processing. You're going to help." The implication hit me like a physical blow. Not just drugs. People. Weapons. Whatever things needed special handling. "I'm not helping you with anything," I said, reaching for the door. Dean's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist with surprising strength. "You misunderstand. It's not a request." Outside, I heard car doors slamming. Multiple vehicles arriving. "Your choice is simple," Dean continued, his voice still eerily calm. "Help process this shipment. Join our operation with a significant financial incentive. Or become part of the shipment." My mind raced through options. The station was isolated. No customers likely at this hour. My phone was in my hand, but Dean was blocking any escape route. "What do I have to do?" I asked. "Playing for time. Smart choice," Dean said, relaxing his grip slightly. "Come outside. My associates will explain everything." As he turned to open the door, I made my move. I slammed my full weight against him, catching him off balance. He stumbled forward, hitting his head against the doorframe with a sickening crack. I shoved past him, sprinting through the store toward the front entrance. Outside, 2 men were approaching from the van. They saw me burst through the doors and immediately reached inside their jackets. I veered away from my car. They'd expect that. And ran instead, toward the darkness behind the station. Gunshots cracked through the night, bullets pinging off metal somewhere to my left. I ran harder than I'd ever run, adrenaline pushing my legs beyond what I thought possible. The land behind the station was open desert, scattered with scrub brush and rocks. I zigzagged through the darkness, putting distance between myself and the lights of the station. Behind me, I heard shouting, car engines starting. I found a wash, a dry creek bed cutting through the desert, and dropped into it, pressing myself against the earthen wall. Headlights swept the area as vehicles circled, searching. I crawled along the wash, staying low, moving away from the station toward the distant glow of the interstate. After what felt like hours, I reached a truck stop several miles away. My clothes were torn, my hands bloody from crawling through the desert. I called 911 from a payphone, my voice shaking as I reported what I'd seen. The police raid happened at dawn. They found evidence of a major trafficking operation. Drugs, stolen goods, and worse. The station had been used as a transfer point for over a year. Dean was arrested along with several others. The investigation eventually uncovered a network spanning 3 states. I gave statements, identified suspects, testified at trials. The prosecutor explained that these operations specifically recruited employees for remote locations. People who seemed ordinary, but had specific skills and no strong community ties. Dean had been placed there to facilitate transfers and watch for potential problems, like me. I moved away after that, changed jobs, tried to put it behind me. But I still check my rearview mirror more often than necessary. Still notice when the same car passes my apartment too many times. Still wake up sometimes, heart pounding, thinking I hear footsteps outside my door. Because the most terrifying part wasn't discovering what Dean was doing. It was realizing how long he'd been watching me before I started watching him. Learning my patterns, my habits, my vulnerabilities. Deciding whether I was a potential recruit or a potential problem. I don't work night shifts anymore. But sometimes, when I pass a gas station late at night, I glance through the windows at the lone attendant inside, and I wonder who might be watching them, waiting for the right moment, the right vehicle, and I wonder if they feel it yet. That prickling sensation on the back of their neck that means they're being evaluated, being watched, being chosen. Folks who go looking for the Henderson place after dark, they ain't always the ones who come back. Lock up tight tonight, son. Old man Thibodeau words, whispered across the chipped Formica counter. Still echo in my head, colder than any Louisiana night fog. My name is Ben. I was 20, working the graveyard shift at a tiny rundown gas station way out on Highway 17, somewhere between nowhere and forgotten. This was deep rural Louisiana, the kind of place where the cypress trees drip Spanish moss like old men's beards, and the night sounds are a chorus of things you'd rather not identify. The station was a flickering, fluorescent island in a sea of darkness. Most nights it was just me, the hum of the ancient soda cooler, and the occasional trucker rolling through. The first hint that this night was going to be different was a faint, rhythmic thump, thump, thump I heard from the back storeroom, the one that always smelled of stale motor oil and something vaguely swampy. I'd been restocking the Slim Jims, the silence of 2 a.m. pressing in. I froze, listening. Probably just the old building settling, or a raccoon trying to get into the trash bins out back. It stopped as soon as I focused on it. I remember shrugging it off, but a little knot of unease tightened in my gut. Why did the air suddenly feel colder? Old man Thibodeau was a regular. Usually came in around 3 a.m. for a cup of burnt coffee and a stale donut. Mostly just for the company, I think. He was there, perched on his usual stool when the car pulled up. It was a sleek, black sedan, the kind you see in movies. Windows tinted so dark you couldn't see inside. It purred to a stop by the pumps, looking alien under our flickering lights. City folks, definitely not from around here. A man got out, tall, wearing a tailored suit that looked out of place even in broad daylight, let alone in the Louisiana boondocks at this hour. He didn't fill up. He came straight inside, his expensive shoes clicking on the cracked linoleum. He had a tight, unsmiling face and eyes that scanned the place like he was casing it. "Need directions," he said, his voice smooth, cultured, but with an edge. "The old Henderson place. Supposed to be off this highway somewhere. The Henderson place." I'd heard whispers about it, of course. An abandoned plantation house, swallowed by the swamp years ago. Locals said it was bad luck, haunted, a place to avoid. I never paid much mind to those stories until I saw old man Thibodeau's reaction. He'd been halfway through a story about gator wrestling, but he clammed up instantly, his weathered face going pale under his tan. He just stared down into his coffee cup, suddenly looking 100 years old. I gave the man the vague directions I knew, down the highway about 5 miles, then a barely marked dirt track on the left, if you could even find it in the dark. He didn't say thanks, just nodded once, his eyes lingering on me for a beat too long, then on Thibodeau, before he turned and glided back out to his car. It pulled away, silent as a shark, disappearing into the fog that was starting to roll in off the bayou. The silence in the station after he left was thick, heavy. Thibodeau finally looked up, his eyes wide and dark. He leaned across the counter, his voice a low, urgent whisper. "Son," he said, his breath smelling of stale coffee and fear. "Folks who go looking for the Henderson place after dark, They ain't always the ones who come back. Lock up tight tonight. He grabbed his cane, his hand trembling, and shuffled out into the foggy night without another word, leaving his half-eaten donut on the counter. His fear was contagious. It wasn't like the usual spooky stories he told. This was real, palpable. I found myself constantly checking the locks on the front door, peering out into the swirling fog that now completely obscured the highway. Every creak of the old building, every distant animal cry from the swamp sounded like a threat. Was I overreacting? He was just an old man, prone to superstition. But his eyes, I couldn't shake the genuine terror I'd seen in his eyes. Around 4 a.m., I heard it again. The thump, thump, thump from the back storeroom. Louder this time, more insistent. And then, a soft, dragging sound. My heart hammered against my ribs. I grabbed the heavy mag light we kept under the counter, my knuckles white. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice sounding ridiculously shaky. Silence, then a floorboard creaked, right outside the storeroom door. I backed away, towards the payphone on the wall. My cell, of course, had no service out here. Just as I reached for it, the lights in the station flickered, buzzed, and died, plunging me into absolute darkness. The only light came from the faint, eerie glow of the fog outside, pressing against the windows. And then, the sound of the front door's deadbolt, the one I knew I'd locked, slowly, deliberately, sliding open. I didn't wait to see who or what was coming in. The back storeroom had another door, a flimsy wooden one that led out to the swampy area behind the station. It was always bolted from the inside. I scrambled towards it in the dark, fumbling with the rusty bolt, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear movement in the main part of the station now. Slow, heavy footsteps, the soft scrape of something being dragged. The bolt finally gave. I threw the door open and plunged out into the cold, wet fog, not caring about the mud, the unseen creatures, anything. I just ran, blindly, towards where I thought the highway might be, the terrifying sounds from the station fading behind. I didn't look back. I stumbled onto the highway a mile down, waving frantically at the first pair of headlights I saw. It was a state trooper. I babbled out my story. The slick car, Thibodeau's warning, the sounds, the blackout, the unlocked door. He listened, his face grim. They went back to the last stop. It was empty. The lights were back on. The front door was locked. The back storeroom door was bolted from the inside. There was no sign of forced entry. Nothing out of place, except for a fresh set of expensive tire tracks in the gravel by the pumps. An old man Thibodeau's half-eaten donut still on the counter. The Henderson place? The trooper just shook his head. "Best to leave that one alone, son," was all he'd say. They never found the man in the suit or his car. Old man Thibodeau stopped coming in for his late-night coffee after that. He never spoke of it again, and neither did I. I quit that job a week later. I couldn't shake the feeling that the last stop gas and go wasn't just a place to refuel your car, but a kind of way station. A place where people on their way to the Henderson place checked in, but didn't always check out. I still don't know what really goes on at the Henderson place, or who those city folks were. But sometimes, when I'm driving late at night, and I see a lonely gas station glowing in the darkness, I feel that old, cold dread. And I remember Thibodeau's words, his terrified eyes. And I just keep driving, a little faster, wondering what secrets the fog on Highway 17 still holds, and who else might be looking for the Henderson place after dark. The rain may be letting up, or perhaps it continues to fall, blurring the lines between reality and the unsettling echoes of these 7 nights. The TRE, once a symbol of passage, now perhaps holds a different meaning for you. We promised you stories born from the heart of darkness, where the ordinary convenience stop became anything but. And those final lingering moments, they have a way of sticking, don't they? Like the damp chill of a rainy night.